To all who come to this ragged place, welcome. And since you're here, why don't we start the show? Today we've got Mark Wahlbeck, an entrepreneur in every sense of the word. He was the CEO of a company called DevSlopes, which teaches people how to code web applications and iOS applications. So teaching people how to program, very awesome, but he's now the advisor of that company. Why? Because he's become a writer. He's become a successful writer too. His book, The Last Hacker, and actually the second one in the series called The Last Hacker, The Rise of the Red Army, both had very successful Kickstarter campaigns. He knows how to use social media. He knows how to use the principles of a lean startup or a startup company towards being a writer, which I think a lot of people are lacking, particularly writers. I know that for myself. You're artsy and whatnot, and you end up missing those points, but he is not missing those points. That's why I think this conversation with him is invaluable, because not only can he talk writing, he can also talk business and marketing, which is a triple threat that's kind of crazy. Oh, and speaking of triple threats, he also voiceover narrates all of his own books. He has his own app that has sci-fi books that you can listen to for free, by the way, called the Wahlbeck app, and he narrates all the books there. So this guy's not only really talented, very artistic, but also incredibly technical. I would say this guy is a master of reality. From our conversation, that's what I really picked up, was that he was able to take from reality what's going on. Hey, oh, this writer's doing this really well. I think I could use that and do that really well in my own work. Oh, this marketing works really well to sell my writing. I think I can use this marketing and make it work. He was able to take all of these different principles and to apply them to his own books, his own projects, his own goals. And that's invaluable information. So I really, really hope you guys get something out of this like the way I did. I had an amazing conversation with him. I really enjoyed speaking with him. I can't stress that enough. And of course, this is the Ragged World. It's an adult conversation. So your virgin ears may hear something you didn't expect, and don't let that throw you. I think that's all you really need to know to get into this podcast. So without further ado, Mark Wahlbeck, Ragged World, let's go. So I'm starting it up as it is. Mark, pleasure to meet you. First things first, how you doing, man?
Great. Thanks.
Great.
Thanks for setting this up. Yeah, good.
No, well, thanks for being on it. I was actually really stoked, really excited. I've been a fan of what I've seen on basically Instagram. I keep seeing your posts for all your books. Okay, you're a writer, you're a programmer, you're a voice actor. You know how to work the hell out of social media. You've got some great Kickstarter campaigns that have both completed and are about to start. I think you have for your Last Hacker books. Like there's the recent one is Last Hacker, The Rise of the Red Army. And you've got Earth Forgotten that I think is just about to start, right?
Sometime soon, yes.
Nice. So I saw that stuff and I thought, man, okay, this guy's a writer. I didn't actually realize the programming part. I didn't know about that. I see you're wearing the DevSlopes hat right now. Didn't know any of this stuff until after I asked you, because I was just really excited by the writing side of things. How does that happen? How does that start? How did you go from being in the space of coding, programming, development, and then to this passion that seems to be writing? Like what brought you over there?
Yeah. So it's a good question. It's 10 years in the making, but basically I'm a programmer, but I've always been an entrepreneur at heart, and programming is what got me there, because I could build my own products, my own software, and I'm a very creative person. And I love to tell stories. And originally it was actually video games that got me into this, because I love telling stories. But at the time I didn't know I loved telling stories. I just liked creating things. And so I was always like into single player games, campaigns and things like that. And I thought maybe because I was so into video games growing up that what I needed to do was make video games. And so I started building it. It's like, well, I can't build it without programming. So I started learning programming. And then people started waving money at me to program things. So I was like, okay. And long, 10-year journey plus, but I learned that it wasn't video games that I wanted to do, was actually storytelling. And there's different mediums for that. And when I learned that, when I made video games and they weren't fun and people weren't playing them, but I was like, but look at the story and all this cool stuff. And people were like, it's still not fun, because a video game is not a story. A video game has to have, game loops and be fun. So I got into programming, and then I ended up teaching programming courses, and my company DevSlopes came to life. That was like 7 years ago. And now it's just growing super, super fast. I've hired a CEO for the company, and the team's growing, and I'm now an advisor, and I spend all my time writing now. Uh, so basically, that's the kind of the transition over here. When I did my soul searching, realized I'm just a storyteller, and writing was the way to do. I even did screen. I was looking into screenplays and making film. I bought all the film equipment for that and tried to get people together, but it was so much work, and I didn't want to make film. I just want to tell stories, and it was writing that was what I needed to do. So anyway, that's the long story short.
You know what? I could understand that a lot. I had that sort of same situation where I was like, I want to do some writing. I like to tell these stories. I I talked to a friend of mine who's a filmmaker, and I was like, "Hey, listen, I know you used to teach. Is he used to teach screenplay writing, right?" And he told me like, "Okay, but I'm right in the middle of this thing. I'm working 20-hour days. I got a documentary that I'm creating. Like, look, if I can help you with your documentary, can you help me with screenplay writing?" And so I ended up just like actually just becoming like a production manager on those sets for a while. And I thought after a second, I was like, okay, wait a minute though. I need where's the writing happening? So I actually switched into that situation as well. So I think I can relate somewhat where you wanted to
Yeah,
start. That reminds me, if I'm not mistaken, I think the last hacker story you had an idea for it to be a video game in the first place.
yeah.
Um, and you were like, "Hey, wait a minute! You know, this is gonna be a lot to go there." But do you still have aspirations of creating a game from any of these stories or from that story particularly?
Yeah, the answer to that is yes. I'm wise enough now to know that I would need to get other people involved that can actually make games fun. But in terms of the idea and everything itself, it was supposed to be a video game. Everything in my mind when I write stuff, like it's very character focused, RPG type characters. I'm not necessarily thinking RPGs, but I'm thinking like when I write characters, like if it cannot, I ask myself, can this character fit into a video game, like as a character you could play? And usually, if the answer is no, I don't typically write those characters. It's a really weird thing, but I'm very character focused. Whereas a lot of other stories and authors are very story focused. Like here's the events, here's what happens. But like I'm really character focused, and so these characters in The Last Hacker are very memorable. And could totally be in a video game, and I absolutely, plan on pursuing that when the fan base is large enough, where I could, have enough money to invest in the prototype, and, which is going to be at least $1 million. I need to do that beforehand, before I do any type of Kickstarter. And then I would go to the audience and say, hey, let's turn this into a full-fledged game, maybe raise like $20 million, and I'll bring on a team. I know how to run software companies, obviously, and but that wouldn't be my core job. But I would bring it to life with all the right people, and I surely am going to do that for sure when the time is right.
That makes sense. That makes a lot of sense. And I mean, yeah, well, for the last hacker ones, you had some pretty killer Kickstarter campaigns. You mentioned the Kickstarter campaign there. And so I think sometimes for writers or artistic people in the first place, they have a little bit of trouble sometimes with the business side of things. They sometimes are suffering, starving artists in that regard and don't tend to hit that button too well sometimes. So what would be some of your advice? Like, what is required for I mean, I know you can do things in a lot of different ways, but what is required for a really killer Kickstarter campaign, or what are some of the bare bones things you feel like you need to do in order to make that work?
Yeah, yeah. So I do have answers, but it's also kind of a hard thing too, because a lot of people are truly truly creative, and like they can't breathe if they can't write or do those creative things, and a lot of them that have been successful in the world like didn't do a lot to become like successful. Like it was like they did it so much that it eventually happened. But with today and self-publishing, if you're at least willing at 5% to put your entrepreneur hat on, then you can really do some things. But today it can be very difficult if you're just so passionate about your art that you're not willing to do what it takes on the marketing. It'd be very very long ride for you. So I would say early on, if you want to make money doing this, like as a career, you have to be able to you have to start thinking right away in terms of growing this. In fact, that's what I did. So I started writing The Last Hacker in like 2019. I kind of took a sabbatical for a year for the company, trying to refigure some things out. And I wrote this book, but I was also from 2019 to 2021 or 2018, 2020, maybe 3 years, I was reading podcasts on independent publishing. Listening to podcasts. I was reading books, every book I could get. I took every masterclass on masterclass.com from every single writer, from James Patterson to Dan Brown to Neil Gaiman, every single class. Like, I mean, I invested so many hours in trying to figure out how to be successful doing this. And then what I started doing is like, okay, I know the game. And so I started doing Instagram posts. I started writing stories on Instagram. And then when TikTok came out, when TikTok started getting really hot, I started hosting on TikTok. And that's still evolving, right? But it's important because to think of now early on, because for instance, 2 months ago, I made some TikTok posts for my book, and the book itself made like $5,000 in sales just from 2 TikTok posts. And if you can understand the gravity of this, if you do something consistently for 3 years, this is anything you do, skill, whatever. And I have a testimony of this. I know this because I've done it so many times now. If you do something consistently every day for 3 years, you will guarantee your success. Guarantee it. And so I know, I started TikTok about a year ago for this brand, Mark Wahlbeck. And I'm at 20,000 I'm like 100 people away from 20,000 followers right now. But I know for a fact, if I do this for 3 years consistently, that's probably going to be almost 1 million followers. And if it was like 17,000 followers at the time. If I can do $5,000 in book sales from one book, from 2 posts, imagine what happens when you've got 1 million followers. And all it literally takes is consistency. And so if you're going to start anywhere as a brand new author, like, forget Instagram. Instagram's a joke. Like, it is a complete joke in terms of growth. Get on TikTok and start just posting stuff today, even without a book. Like, just post stuff that you're interested in that's related to your audience, and it will pay off like crazy. And you evolve eventually over time. But, if you're going to be in indie publishing, get on TikTok, start building that following, because it's free. For my first campaign, I did some paid ads. You don't even have to do that with TikTok. TikTok's free.
Man, that's kind of a big statement, being that, like, hey, it's 3 years, be consistent. I guess one thing I'm thinking about too is you said you wrote over 1 million words between the first book and the second one, right? So I suppose, what does consistency mean to you then? Because it sounds like it means a lot. Like, I'm interested to know a little bit more about that. Like, how did you write 1 million words in that amount of time? And I think it was a fairly short time too. So you must have been really on top of this.
Yeah, within a couple of like a year and a half, 2 years. The thing is, I read this thing from Stephen King. He has a book on writing, and okay, yeah, it was either him or James Patterson, but one of those two said that you really need to write 1 million words before you're good enough to really get published. And then he was talking about traditional publishing. And nowadays, you can really publish anything, and people will read it, and they can make money. But I want it to be really good, and I wanted to really hone my craft. And so, I wrote every day for a year and posted those stories on social media for a year straight. Like, I know this sounds like your stupid hustle grind thing, but that's what it was. I literally would get up at 5 a.m. I'd get my head straight. By 6 a.m. I would write my little story, like, just a minute long story. I record it, I put it on Instagram, and that adds up. And then I would do short stories. And then somebody was asking me advice one time about like how they can make money as a writer. And I suggested, well, one thing you do right out of the gate is go onto Fiverr, and you could write stories for people for money. And they totally blew me off, said that's not possible. No one's going to spend money on it. I've tried that, and like, it really rubbed me the wrong way. So I wanted to not just prove them wrong, but I wanted to show that it could be done. I went on Fiverr, and I created some videos about, I will write you fictional stories, and I just put it out there, wrote a few stories for people that I knew, had them give me reviews. And all of a sudden I started getting all these orders for fictional stories. I made almost $1,000 like in a few weeks from people requesting stories. I wasn't even charging high prices. And it just, so I had those writing opportunities too, and that's also a testament of just by virtue of doing, you'll have success. So I was doing that, and of course I was writing other books too. I wrote multiple, like Earth Forgotten. That book's done, and that adds up as well too. My last Hacker Second book is done, and then recently, like 4 or 5 months ago, I told my daughter, who's become a writer herself, which is kind of cool. She's seen what I've done and like totally has like the faith that she can do it now. I said, if we finish a book, let's go to Disney World in the summer. And so we wrote a book. I wrote another book. She did too. And so like there's a lot of things like that I did to really push myself. But I just was I try to write every day, Monday through Saturday. I don't write on Sunday, but I try to write every day, and that just adds up. A lot of people I know who are professional writers write once a week. So, it takes time, it just takes time.
That can make sense. No, I think the writing every day thing is the thing. Also, it seems like you found a way to take little bites out of things as well, because you had these 60-second micro stories that you would narrate yourself
Yeah.
as well and put out there. That feels like a good method to almost like a lean startup kind of format of like, okay, are anybody going to care about any of these stories? Was that sort of
Yeah.
an idea, or was it really that you just wanted to have something to write every day?
No, so that's part of it actually. So I learned early on that writing is hard, as many writers know. And if you follow writers like upcoming indie writers on Instagram, they're all posting like these silly memes about, oh, why are you on social media instead of writing? Like they're always posting these things that are making fun of the fact that they're not writing when they should be. And I felt that. And the thing is, writing a book is a lot of work. So I come from an entrepreneur background where I do things and I get results. Like just months ago, like maybe like 9 months ago, we were going to run a promotion. So I built out a landing page on ClickFunnels, prepared some ads for it, got my email list ready, sold a product, and then within like 48 hours, 72 hours, we had launched a product, sold it pre-orders of it, and made like whatever, $30,000. And, like I'm used to things like that. And then you come to writing a book and you do it for a week and it's still not done. You do it for a month and it's still not done. Right? You know, for me, it can take like 3 to 4 months to write a book. A lot of people, it takes a lot longer. Some people even faster, which is crazy to me. But anyways, it's really depressing. For me, it's super, super depressing, actually. I can't handle it. Like, I cannot do that. I have to release things. It's in my nature and it motivates me. And so I started writing the stories. Like, I'm gonna write new things every day, but also just spark some ideas. Like, what kind of ideas and crazy things can I think of? And so I'd go on to Deposit Photos. It's a stock photo website, and I would just scroll through images from some artists I follow on there. And if the second something caught my eye, any idea, I would stop, download the image. I was stuck with it, and then I would just spend the next 15 minutes writing a 60-second story that's 140 words and about that particular thing. But guess what? It has to sound like it finishes, right? So I'm now having to think like, okay, start, finish. What can I do in 60 seconds? And it was amazing. In fact, I published a course recently, like 6 months ago, on Skillshare about how to get started as writing. And one of the very first things that I recommend people do is 60-second stories and 500-word stories, because I have a lot of conversations with upcoming authors who are seeing what I'm doing. I'm not famous or anything by any means, but they're asking me questions. And I tell them, you should write small stories all the time. Write them all the time so you can know what it feels like to finish something, because everybody starts these books and they don't finish. Like almost every person that I talk to, I say, "Are you finished yet?" Because they say, "How do I get published? How do I sell my book?" They ask me, "How do I sell my book?" And I've learned to ask them in response, "Is your book finished?" And they say no every single, like not even 99% of the time, every single time they say their book is not done. And it's because it's hard. So get good with finishing things. Finish something so you can feel good about yourself. And now that's why on TikTok, I have been really wanting to grow it, but I don't I want to do things the way I want to do them, have fun doing it. And I like telling stories. What a lot of authors do is, they'll dance or they'll post like author jokes. And I'm thinking to myself, you guys, if you're posting author jokes, you're only going to bring more authors who are following you. You're not bringing in the audience that wants to actually read your books. So they're posting these things. And so what I'm always trying to figure out new things to do to write more and to finish things. And so for me, social media is like my addiction for writing, because I get to write my big books, but I also get to publish things daily. And I had this idea like last month. I was like, well, I want to tell stories on TikTok, but my regular format isn't working the way that I want it to. Which is why I stopped writing stories on Instagram too, because they're not coming on these platforms to like read stories. It's just not designed for that in the way that I was doing it, and my performance was waning. And so now I've got this new style which is just taken off, and where I'm taking my stories and I'm just telling them like I'm talking to a friend, like I'm telling my kids a bedtime story. And I I really believed it would work, and it did. Like one of my posts, I've only done like 4 of these. One of them just the other day is like 100,000 views already, and the other one was like 25,000 views. And so now I'm even more excited because I don't have to come up with stupid TikTok skits anymore, which I hate. And I've done that, and it's worked. I hate it. Like I don't want to do that. I want to write stories, and now I can write stories and publish them every single day and enjoy doing it. And so my point is, like, there's ways to publish things daily to get that fix of getting your words out there while you're still writing your big stories. And so that's exciting for me. I would have quit a long time ago if all I did was write a book for 6 months and then resurface my head and then restart the process. Like, it's just, I can't do it.
Man, that's really really strong. Like that is powerful advice. I hope that I'm going to try to listen to that. I hope that sinks into my own brain because that is part of the problem with social media and writers, I think, is that you are just writing, and a lot of times people aren't really going on a lot of these platforms just to read text necessarily. I love
Yeah.
that you found a way to synthesize your different talents essentially, because you are doing voiceover, you write these stories. I also like the idea of the micro story as well. I can relate to that too a little bit, because when I learned how to do comic book writing, I learned the comic book script format. I took some classes with the guy who was the editor of Marvel and IDW and all of that, and like I learned the structure that they do. And I thought, how am I going to actually implement this structure on a daily basis? And I
Mm.
tell this story all the time because I'm proud of myself, I guess. But I did 60 comics in 60 days. I said before I eat, like
Oh,
I'm
wow.
gonna wake up before I eat or anything. I'm gonna do that short format because I've written novels already.
Yeah.
I've written screenplays and stuff, and I thought, hey, this is no big thing. Like I can do long form stuff pretty well, and I can finish it. Like you said, the finishing thing is huge, but it is depressing to spend like however many months you're going to
Yeah.
spend and you just nothing's actually gone out. So that's exactly what I did. I
Yeah.
said, like, I'm not going to eat. I'm just going to finish a comic book. And the first one was like, this is going to be a 1-page comic. It's going to have anywhere from 4 to 6 panels, and that's the deal. And after 30 days, because I had actually committed to 30 days, I was like, I like doing this. I'm going to do 60. And I did some longer ones. I did three pages or whatever. And out of that, I actually took the 3 comics that I ended up actually making.
Yeah.
So that became a thing
That's
too.
great.
But the fact that you could share your process as well is another thing I think is interesting. And you were talking about the medium. You changed you changed the way you applied things for the medium to work. I'm
Yeah.
wondering at what point do you, or what's a good way to know, or if you have any thoughts on this, whether it is the material or the medium? Because of course you can be putting out bad material to the right medium and it's still bad material, or you could be putting
Yeah.
out great material in a way that the medium doesn't really take, and now you're selling ice in Antarctica, right? So
Right.
I don't know if you have an answer to this or if this is a weird question, but at the same time, what do you think? When do you know it's the material? When do you know it's the
Yeah.
medium?
So it's a hard thing, and I think it's first off, it's not something people should worry about right out of the gate. Like, get in a flow for a few months of just posting whatever. Like, because so many people make excuses not to do things. So just post whatever for a few months. Just do it like daily if you can. And once you get past that, you're in a rhythm. Then things can start working out. So for instance, there's this guy, I know he's an author. You know, he had like 2,000 followers on TikTok, and you know, I was like at 18,000 at the time, so only 2,000 followers ago. And he posted a lot of stuff that I thought was really boring and lame, and so did everyone else because it had like 50 views, 100 views. And then he made one post that just randomly went viral because of the right things and stuff. And it actually, literally in 4 days, he jumped up to 20,000 followers, more than me, from one post. And I was like, first I was like, that's really cool because look what it's done for him. And then what's funny is he didn't really capitalize on that. He just went back to making all those old posts, and so they're all at 50 views, 100 views. And you know, I was thinking to myself, there was a chance for him to see what he did here, you know, and do some more of that. I mean, maybe he didn't recognize it at the time, but if you can just get it in a point where now you're doing this regularly, then you can look at what you're doing and just see if there's a way to improve. When I would make my stories, okay, they took like a lot of effort to get people following. Like in fact, on Instagram, I tend to lose more followers than I gain, and some of those stories they don't perform well in the format that I was doing, and the same thing on TikTok too. You know, I had so the so the posts for me that do the best, that I enjoy doing are ones, at least early on, where like I would do book trailers. Like, you know, I put some cool music, the right images at the right place to invoke an emotion and get people curious. You know, what if the world ended? You know, and that's how it starts off. And those ones performed really well. And I'll keep doing yeah, I'll keep doing those for my books, but you know, you can only do so many, you know, you can only do so many. Like for me, I want to do things that are meaningful. And so I say, okay, well, look at these posts that are performing well, look at these posts that are not performing well. And you know, what can I do? What can I do to fix things? And my on TikTok, my stories where I just narrate and it pans across, shows images and stuff, those just, no matter how hard I try, they don't perform well. But this new format, for instance, I specifically, this whole new format, because I watched a guy named Mr. Ballin. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him. He tells like creepy stories and stuff. Anyway, he just a year and a half ago on TikTok, he was a nobody, 0 followers. And then he just did a post where he's talking to the camera, telling a scary story. And like overnight, got 1 million followers. And then like he just kept doing that, telling scary stories like he's talking to a friend, like real true stories. And you know, got like millions of followers in weeks. And then he moved to YouTube, and now he's got like, I think 6 million followers there, all in a year, one freaking year. Because in his case, and I studied him thoroughly, like his format was spot on, and people are into the whole creepy pasta thing right now. So I was like, okay, people really want that human connection. That's why my posts don't work when I'm not showing my face. When I don't show my face, like they don't work as well as the ones that they do. Um, and I learned that. I learned that from hard experience. And so I was like, what if I could take my storytelling, but don't read off a script because people don't like that either. Don't, you know, she went down here. She said, she thought this, she thought that. Like, there's not enough time to convey anything with all of the dialogue and internal thought and stuff. And so I said, okay, I'm going to take what I'm good at, and I'm going to do this Mr. Ballin style, the format. So my unique thing, Mr. Ballin's format, and I'm going to see if I can do that. So I wrote a little story, a post-apocalyptic story, like 2,000 words. And what I've been doing is I've been breaking it down into these videos, but I tell it in a way where I can finish it in 60 seconds. And I tell it like I'm telling a friend, and 100,000 views, right? And I was like, okay, now I've got something here. So I know this is a long-winded answer, but like I'm looking at things that I'm doing and trying to improve. But aside from all that, the best advice I could ever give in that regard is like, just, or whatever it is, just post. Like, don't not post because you haven't figured it out yet. The consistency is so key, not just for the algorithms, but for yourself as well too. You know, make a rule to post. And I'm not great at this by any means, especially since summer started. I have really been struggling with my kids and getting a new routine going here, but just post no matter what.
Oh, no, I appreciate that. And I appreciate that too. Speaking of posting, no matter what, posting what you're doing, posting what's going on. I'm starting to see some patterns there, because it seems like it started with studying, taking what you already knew from entrepreneurship, then getting consistent in the writing, getting a way to actually finish, finding different things that inspire you to write stories in the first place, then start putting it out, then look at that consistency and see, okay, is this working? Are these and now you can look at the performance. Is this performing well now?
Yeah.
Now I'll start talking about mediums. Now I'll start talking about should I change to TikTok? Should I change to, or should I be changing my format on TikTok? But like it sort of started, like you said, it's a 10-year process to get to this thing. Not that it has to be for everybody, because like they could probably just
Yeah.
listen to this now and do this, you know. But am I on track with that? Like that's
That's
the
100% right. At least that's how it worked for me. And I think it works well like that for other people too.
oh, no
The
doubt.
ones that are succeeding.
No doubt. Like, and I was gonna ask this too, like, because you're at home, you got a routine. Are you the type of person who puts together a particular routine for the day, for living life, for your weeks? Are you a routine based person, or do you do it differently?
So that's evolved over the years. I for me, the words routine and schedule are two completely separate things. A routine is, for me, is something that you do on a regular basis, and usually in a regular format or order. You know, a schedule is I need to do these things at this time and these places. And what I have found that when you start scheduling things, uh, it tends to always fail because because let's say I'm scheduled to write for an hour. I schedule myself to write for an hour at 8 a.m. Well, let's say the night before, your kids were up late or whatever, you lost sleep, you're early in the morning, on 4 hours of sleep, let's just say, and now you're sitting at the computer keeping that schedule. Well, all of a sudden things are a little bit different, and you're should you push through and just write anyway? And maybe the answer is yes, maybe not. Versus being a little more flexible. When you have schedules, it's easier to fail. And I'm not talking about like meetings. Meetings are different. Like when I was a CEO or was wearing my CEO hat, sure, a schedule with meetings and stuff. You do your meetings, great. Meeting, you're tired now, it doesn't matter. You do your meetings, you got your schedule. But especially as a creative person, you need to give yourself flexibility to be creative. And so what I do is I have a routine, which it does involve some part of the schedule. So I get up every day, even here on summer and even on Saturdays, I get up at 5 a.m. Um, I do personal studies and things. Then and I have to do this, otherwise I don't succeed in my day. So like, first off, don't this is nothing to idolize or anything like that. It's just I do it because I have to. And so I get up at 5 a.m. and I get my head straight. I do some studies, and then I exercise after that. I've got a tonal on my wall, and I just go do that so I can be close at home and just get it done quickly. And then at 7, I typically go into my office and do some type of creative thing like reading. I try to read a book. I find if I read some out of a book in the morning, I get motivated to write. And sometimes I even take notes in books, like I highlight stuff like, hey, this is internal dialogue. This is what this author did well, whatever. And then sometime before 10 a.m., I will write, or I will put myself in a place to write. So for instance, so I have 7 kids. Okay. Life is very busy. I work from home. So yeah, life is very busy. So what I do is put myself in places where I'm forced to write. So for instance, today, I took all of my kids to this place called Urban Air. It's like this big jumping facility where they jump on trampolines and stuff, whatever, because it's this enclosed facility. It's got air conditioning, and basically, and it's hot here in Texas. And then I put my headphones on. I let them play for 2 hours. But guess what? The computer I brought has no Wi-Fi. It's my MacBook Air. It can't, like, there's nothing on, not even a browser except for Safari, and nothing's connected. None of my Google accounts or anything. And on my phone, so this is ridiculous, but I've got 2 phones. Okay, this is my business phone that has all the social media apps on it. This stays in my office at all times. I don't touch it unless it's like time to post on TikTok. This is my regular phone, has no Facebook, no TikTok, no anything. And the amount of times I lift my phone to look at TikTok and it's not there is like phenomenal. Like, I can't believe how addicted a human can be to look at stuff. but it's never there. So it goes right back. No YouTube, anything. So I put my headphones on, and literally for 2 hours, I cannot do anything else except for write. And once I start, the words start coming. And so I do this multiple times per week. I know this sounds ridiculous, but my kids go to gymnastics 3 days a week. The reason why my wife doesn't take them, and the reason why I take them, is so I can write. I'm stuck on these bleachers with a whole bunch of parents who are like cheering their kids and stuff. I got my headphones on, and I'm forced to write. Like, do I really want to be watching gymnastics for an hour? Heck no, I don't. So like, I'm gonna write. Like, that's probably a messed up thing to say, but anyway, so already like 4 days out of the week, I'm probably getting in almost 10,000 words in a week because I've forced myself into a routine. Now gymnastics at a different time, right? And sometimes those things switch, whatever. But I made sure to put in my routine things that will cause me to have success, and that's how I operate. Because if I force myself to do things, then I will do those things.
Yeah, you've essentially trapped yourself into writing at that point. Like this is you're not going
Yeah.
anywhere. You got to be here, and you're stuck without any distractions. That's awesome. Actually, it doesn't sound crazy at all. Just to say that's not ridiculous at all. That makes a lot of sense. It's reality based. You live in reality, especially if you have 7 kids. I have no idea why you're here talking to me. Then, how did you do this? Like that's already a whole nother topic, I think. But yeah, like what a okay. So, but I'm amazed that you're here to talk to me anyway now. So thank you even more for the time you're taking. But no, that leads me to the idea of then is there obviously with the phones and with the computer, I can see that this writing computer, this business phone, the way you've set up the apps that are on it and are not on it. I asked you like, hey, what do you put in your day? Do you actively, like the way you do with your phones and computer, not do particular things? Like do you, maybe that's a bigger list for you as opposed to I'm going to absolutely do this? Is there an I'm absolutely not going to do these particular things, or I actively avoid these circumstances or situations in order to not throw myself off from the goals and paths that I want? Is that something you do?
Well, yeah, I mean, it's kind of similar. It's kind of in the same sense because, for instance, this is you can see my office here. It's where I work out of. But dude, you can't see this, but I've got a high-powered gaming PC right here with Warzone on it. It can be very distracting, especially when my son comes to play. But you know what? On the door, which you can't see either, I have actually put a sign that says "Do not enter," and it goes from red to green, and I lock the door. And so if anyone sees that, it means don't come bother me. So sometimes I will come and lock that because once, like, if my son, he's like 10, he's like, hey dad, let's play Warzone. It's really hard for me to say no because that game's pretty fun. But so there's things I do like that. But I have a nice comfortable couch right here, where if I'm tired, it's really easy to lay down, right? So I originally started in that. I have a sound booth back there. I originally started writing in the sound booth. I'm going to go in there for 30 minutes. But even that doesn't work because I go in there and I write for 30 minutes and I do that. But then when I come out to breathe, because it's hot in there, like it's so easy to go do something else, even without my distractions and things like that, which is why for me, it's so critical. I leave my property. Again, I work from home, so I have to do those things. But like I leave my property to make sure that I can write, because even like I'm just a weak human like anybody else, right? And so I have to make sure that I don't put myself in front of temptation, and which is why the extremes of the second phone, second computer, and the things I don't do is I don't install apps that can distract me. I don't install those things, and I try not to work on like I try not to work on this computer right here. I try not to work on my gaming PC. I only work from my MacBook Air because nothing's on it. Like even, and it's crazy because even when my business, the CEO sometimes will call me, like, can you help me out with something or look at something? If I'm out and about, I can't even help him. Like, even though it needs to absolutely be done, I'm forced to say, you know what, when I get back, I'll take care of it. Because it's really easy to make excuses, even for emergencies. Like, hey, can we do this on this and this? I'm like, sorry, I literally physically can't do that right now. And so I just put myself in a position to succeed. That's all. And that just, and those, just those things to talk about, nothing else besides that really.
Wow, that makes a lot of sense, though. Putting yourself in a position to succeed. I could even think of if people from your business are calling and you're out and you're saying, well, look, I physically can't do it. I think the people at your business are going to start to understand, too, that if Mark is out, maybe we should be ready to take care of this problem on our own, too. And maybe some of those problems get handled on their own where they would have called you anyway. But it's like, he's
Yeah.
out. He's not going to be able to help us there. So like it really takes you out of the bottleneck essentially for that situation. At least that's one thing. And then again, the sign on the door,
Yeah.
that's like you, it seems like you know what you want to do, and that consistency, being able to be consistent without making those excuses. Oh well, I got caught up with this, I got caught up with the business, I got caught up with the kids. That could really, that's the kind of thing that I think everybody tends to make. Now, I'm not going to say everybody, that's a blanket statement, but a lot of people make the excuses of that. Well, I have kids, and this, I've heard that a lot. Well, you're writing, and I have kids, and that's why it's not working.
Um,
Well, Mark has 7 kids, so he
uh,
found a way. Man,
yeah, you never be able to throw that excuse, that particular excuse at me, I guess. But one other thing you could do too that I didn't mention is really crazy, and I don't recommend this for everybody. But if you're tenacious, you do Kickstarters. You launch products before they're done, like the last hacker, where it raises $18,000, but my product is not ready. If you do not ship, you will get sued, And so no matter what, I have to write. I have to write, because writers, like, they don't, well, if this works out, great. If it doesn't, doesn't, but if, like Brandon Sanderson, he did that $30 million campaign. Well, you know what? He's got to hire a whole company now to manage all of his stuff on Kickstarter and to do all this stuff, hire employees, because if he doesn't, he's going to be in big trouble, right? So sometimes doing things like that can actually be very helpful. In the business world, we call them pre-launches. To test market validity and things like that, and otherwise. But that's another thing you could do is, if you have any audience at all, sell something before it's done, and you'll be very motivated to finish it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like signing up for the marathon and then deciding to get in shape in a way. Like okay,
Yeah, yeah,
I'm gonna be running this thing,
yeah.
so it's time to
You
go.
know,
That makes a lot of sense. No, that's incredible. And I mean, you seem like a pretty driven, ambitious person. Have you always been that way? Like what things are driving you forward like this?
no, I don't know. It's so, yeah. People have said that,
Or is it not accurate?
well, so I am driven, but it's not like a hunger for success or anything. I'm really, really addicted to, like, learning, like just increasing my intelligence. When I drive down my suburban neighborhood and I see this 70-year-old man, like, watering his small little lawn and tending to his flowers, like, it makes me cringe, like, just me personally, because it's just like, I know that I'll never be that guy. Like, I don't want to take a break. Like, I want to, like, learn new things until the day that I die, like, and do things. And so, and it's not about money or anything else. It's just about being, improving yourself, and so, like, I really thrive off of that. Some people don't, and that's completely right. Some people, like, they really love life. I know many people who love to hike, and they will hike the same trail every day, and it's exhilarating for them. Like, after the first time hiking it, I would want to die. I'd be like, okay, what's new? Let's do something else. Let's go to a higher peak, and that's just the way that I'm wired in that sense. Whether it's good or bad. Sometimes it's bad. Sometimes it's good. But for me, and I spend a lot of time with my kids and family and stuff too. But every single day, like, if I don't learn something new in a day, like, it kind of really bothers me. So, like, I'll, in my bookshelf over there, like, I love, like, ancient history. This morning I was reading about the Sumerians and, like, 4000 BC, the first writing systems on planet Earth, and, like, where they came from and how they developed. Like, I just, like, am so interested in learning things, and all that stuff is perfect for writing because I get to put those things into my writing. And so, like, really, that's what drives me. Like, is the new, because you see progress, right? Like, and I gained this faith in consistency. So I ran multiple businesses, and then with DevSlopes, I learned that, hey, I know for a fact, if I am consistent with something for 2 to 3 years, it will succeed no matter what. And I know this works for other people too. And so because I have that knowledge, I'm like, okay, writing books. Like some people come to me like, oh, the Kickstarter, you're doing all these things. That's great. I was like, well, but the reality is I knew 2 years ago that if I just did this consistently and I learned the industry and I grew with it, like it will pay off and it will continue to do that. Like I'm a nobody right now, but I know like if I keep doing this, it'll work out. And things are happening. Like I got invited to into a private writing club with a New York Times bestselling author who is coaching me on being a good enough writer to be published by top publishers, and like rips me apart every week. I think sometimes some of my writing is great and then they just go and rip me to pieces, but I like love it. Like I'm addicted to it because it's just like this is so great. So it, like things are happening, but it started with 0 followers. It started with 0 words. It started just kind of with an idea, really. I don't know. So if you call that driven, I guess then it's driven. But that's just what I do.
I feel like that's I could connect with that because it feels like adventurous. Even then, maybe I won't call it
Yeah,
as much
yeah,
driven as like I think some people, like you said, there's going to be the people that are like, all right, I watered my lawn. I'm super proud of that. Your day is complete, and that's the thing. And they can do that every single day. They could see the same people every day, and they feel good. And I think that's you need that. I think in the world obviously needs those people too, but also you got to have the people that are going, okay, what's over that hill? What's across that ice land bridge so we can go, like populate North America?
yeah.
And there's got to be some people,
That's right.
who leave the place, who are interested in the Epic of Gilgamesh from the Sumerians, and
Yeah. Oh,
all
you know
that kind of
about all
stuff.
that's great.
Oh yeah, man. No, I'm connected pretty hard with a lot of the things you're saying because like me and my wife are that way. If we're in Italy, we're like, well, what if we went to Greece? Like we can't
Yeah,
we can't stop at the last bit. So it makes a lot of sense. So maybe it's more just that there are people who are probably born with that adventurer vibe. You mentioned too learning. You want to learn something every day. Is there any kind of trick to that? Is there a way to that at least that you? I'm not going to say that everybody. I know we always want to find the silver bullet or something, but things. The reality is a lot of times we have to take things from a lot of different places to make it work specifically for us. But is there a way that you attack learning if you want, or is there a way that you go about learning something new and synthesizing that information so that it's usable,
yeah,
executable, or whatnot?
yeah. So there is, and for context, my tech company DevSlopes, literally we train people, we teach people how to become programmers, help them get jobs. And so I've literally made over 1,000 training videos myself personally, training and teaching, improving, revising, knowing how people learn, how people think, and all the pitfalls people go through, the things I've gone through. And uh, people do learn in different ways, surely, but there are some common patterns. And so for me, I have kind of just like how I have faith that if I do something consistently, it will pay off because I've seen it happen. It's the same thing with learning. Like I know for a fact, like if I wanted to learn rocket science, or you know, uh, physics, whatever, like I could do it because there's a pattern for me for learning the things I do. And it really comes down to identifying. We'll talk about writing specifically. It really comes down to identifying ways to improve. One of my I'm not the CEO anymore, but I'm an advisor. But one of my employees at DevSlopes, he reached out to me the other day and was asking me like, how do I really learn? Because he was trying to learn something very hard. And I gave him some advice, and really the advice is you need to take time to study things for the sake of getting better. So yes, when you read books, um, you will study, you will get better, and it helps you. But um, I have a book on my shelf over there that I'm working on improving, being able to connect with the character. And so I found a book that does it really well, and I have highlighted anywhere where there's internal dialogue. How much internal dialogue? Well, this page has 40% internal dialogue. This page has this percent. Stephen King, I did it to a Stephen King book recently too, Billy Summers, because I think he's a fantastic writer. Like, what is he doing here? And I'm actually highlighting and I'm taking notes. Not necessarily notes, just like I'm pointing out things that I need to implement into my life and into my writing. But I'm doing this as a real process. Like I literally took the book, I sat down with it, and for the purpose of trying to dissect it. And so improving and learning really has to be a dedicated process where you're not speed reading. You're not just watching a video either. I tell this to all my students at Dev Slopes too, because they'll watch videos and they don't understand something. It's like, look, the videos are really supplemental. The real learning comes in the doing. You take something that you just learned and you apply it. If you don't do that, it is going to go in one ear and come right out the other. And so, for instance, if you are, as a writer, you're learning, okay, it's good to have more internal dialogue in your stories because it can bring you closer to a character versus just action. Do this, he does this, he does that, he does this, he does that. What I need to do is identify that internal dialogue and someone who's doing it correctly. And then I need to say, okay, that's what that is. Now I need to go and practice it. And that's literally what I did the other day, because I'm trying to improve my internal dialogue. And I dissected this book and then I tried implementing it myself, because I have a tendency when I write to write fast, like with no details. You just one thing after the other, and it's entertaining. But I was like, okay, can I slow down? Can I figure out a way to really focus on something small? Like, what is something super important to a character that's a very small thing, but that I can expand upon, where I can touch upon their past, their history, and like all of a sudden now I've got all this internal dialogue, and I give myself an exercise to do that. And so here's my whole point: is a lot of people, whether it's programming or writing or whatever, they think that by virtue of just either doing without study or by studying without doing, that they're going to get better. And there are plenty of authors who have read all the best authors like Stephen King and stuff, and they don't get better, and they keep writing the same books. And everyone improves over time and to some degree. But to answer your question, this is a very long answer here.
You can take your time.
Is you have to take dedicated time to improving yourself and implement those changes. Otherwise, you will not improve very fast or at all. And so for me, that is like so critical to my writing, guys, because it's not about the money at all. Because I know some people who are writing smut and it's awful, and they're making like $70,000 a month, and it's fine, but it's awful for me. But the writing, I think, is awful. I read it and there's spelling mistakes, and like the English is terrible, and it's like some of the worst writing I've read. And this author posts on a Facebook group, their revenue, and like they made $70,000. But for me, it's like I care about improving and being as good as I possibly can. And unless you focus on doing that, you're never going to get better in your study. So anyway, long story short, actually focus on improving very specific things, and actually studying for the sake of learning, not just learning by osmosis.
That makes a lot of sense. It's there's a slight focus change there, where you're saying, okay, I'm going to read this book, or like I'm going to take the master class from Aaron Sorkin, or but you're going to have to actually do the exercises, or you're going to actually have to do the,
yes.
That's like, I'm bringing that 60-day comic book thing, but that was my plan there, was that I'm like, okay, I listened to this guy, we made one comic, by the end of this class, we've all made one comic. I'm like, really? Am I going to really remember how to do this structure later? And then, of course, I think you also learn other things, the consistency of doing things like that over and over. I think you find out what the job actually is, or you find out what the work you're doing, whatever it is you're learning, you find out what are the actions you can actually take to make this work. I think, like for example, with writing, I don't know if you have a system. You've mentioned a couple of things where once you start getting some words down, you get going. That's essentially what I do too. Like, I don't really believe in a writer's block situation, because I think you can write your way out of it.
I don't either.
I even, when I would wake up in the morning and write like dog, cloud, Asia, and I'm like, okay, a dog flies on a cloud to Asia, like this would, and I'm like, okay, that sentence is trash, but I'm writing sentences now, and it's going forward. So But yeah, I'm kind of getting off track there just because it's exciting that you're talking about. There was a thing you were talking about internal dialogue and character. You mentioned character a few times in saying that like this is what's really kind of integral to you in your writing. What is it about character that catches you so much? I know like that's what you said you liked about the games as well, video games, these characters you'd get connected to. Why is it character, not that it's over story necessarily, obviously if there's no
Yeah,
story when you're following these characters around, but I think you are right that there are stories that you can tell where you're following around a compelling character and that's already almost a story in itself. So what is
yeah,
it for you that's what makes an exciting character for you? What is it you love about character so much?
yeah. That's a great question. This is a topic people like to debate with me on a lot whenever I bring it up, but it's funny. But I have found that if you can connect with the character, you're rooting for them, and it really doesn't matter what they're doing at that point. And that's why Stephen King talks about there's no need for a plot in a story, and I actually would agree with him because um, once you're connected with a character, you care about knowing what happens next, whether that's walking to the store or whatever it might be. And, and then you're kind of hooked. And this is how it is with anime and manga. So I read a book called Manga, The Theory and Practice. I don't remember his name because it's hard to pronounce, but he's the creator of JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and some other famous mangas and animes. And he talks about in manga, Japanese, and in Japanese literature too. And I've been reading some Japanese books in English, uh, and he talks about how it's 90% character for them. He says if you can focus on character, then whatever they do doesn't really matter. And he's right, because if you go and analyze, like, if you're an anime, like the top anime you've ever watched, like Hunter x Hunter, for instance, was a very famous anime. And when I actually go in and I made a TikTok on this where I vocally tell the story of Hunter x Hunter from first season to last season, it's the stupidest sounding thing that you've ever heard of because the story is so dynamic. But you know what? When you're watching it, you are in love with it and you always want to know what happens. You want to know if the main character is going to get stronger, if they're going to defeat this person, like that is all you care about. But when you look at the whole story, you're like, this is a terrible, stupid story. And that's because you're so committed to the characters. And so I know from experience and from the things that I read that if you fall in love with a character, then you're committed. And Stephen King is probably the best example of this on the planet because everybody he writes is a character. Like the Tommyknockers story, I mean, like you're spending the first like 15 chapters getting to know these two characters. One of them's a drunk, this other one's this woman who's a writer, and she lives in a cabin in the woods, and slowly things start surrounding these two people, and you're so invested in them regardless of the story being okay, but you're so invested in them that nothing matters. And so for me, that's advice I like to give to brand new people is if you're not great with writing and and if your story's weak, really tie people to your character because your readers will really overlook a lot of the other stuff. I went to one more thing on this. I went to church a few months ago, and this guy, an older guy, 70s, I seen him around, I know him, and then he's like, I want to tell a story. And because I know him and have seen him around, like I'm like, okay, what kind of story could he tell? And he's just like, so, and why would he say, I want to tell you guys a story? Like it was like so interesting. And so I was like, okay. And then he proceeds to say like, so I went to the store and it was an auto mechanic store and I bought a quart of oil. And okay, so I'm like really intrigued. I'm like, why is he telling us a story about a quart of oil? And he goes to talk about how he went to the store, and then he went home, and this whole story, his drive home, everything, and he was talking about how he got a phone call and like some unimportant details too. And I'm like, so like, what is going to happen? Like, I really want to know. And then he talked about how then when he finally got under his car to change the oil. He reached for the oil can or the oil quart, and it was gone. And I was like, okay, what happened to it? Like this is, and keep on, this is a boring story. This is super boring. But I was like, I'm visualizing like this old guy. He's looking for his quart of oil, and he's like, it wasn't there. And I swore it was there, and I looked over, couldn't find it. So I drove back to the store, and I talked to the person, and like we couldn't find it anywhere on the counter. I thought maybe I left it there. And then he's like, oh, you know what? I have an extra one in my inventory. I must have put it back. And he's like, okay. I thought it was resolved. He left his oil there. He's like, no, but that wasn't, the story wasn't over. So then I took the oil quart back home, and I get under the car, and I set it down. I'm about to do it again, and the oil quart is gone again. I was like, what is going on? Are these gremlins or what's happening? And what had happened that he explained was the wind had knocked them over, and it rolled down his steep driveway down to the gutter. And so he then saw something down there. And he went down there, and there's 2 quarts of oil. And that was the end of the story. And it was completely pointless. The story was stinking pointless. But I was committed the entire way because I was in his shoes walking this journey with a character. There was no plot. There was no anything else. But it was super intriguing. And you can do that with characters. You can't do that like with a, he said, she said kind of story where you're just telling it from an eagle's view down. It never works. If you don't have good plot and good direction on a story like that, no one's going to listen to it. But if you're invested in the character, you can get someone excited about a missing quart of oil. I don't, and I believe that now. And so that's what I try to do, is really make it character focused.
Man, I think you're right though, because you hooked me in the middle for sure. When he went back to the store and they got it and he came back and it was gone again, then I was like, okay, now I'm in.
Yeah,
But
I don't even know.
I guess you were hooked. You were interested in him, so therefore, it's going forward. That's amazing. No, and you're right. You mentioned manga and anime, and that's true. A lot of times, the actual story is kind of all over the place or a crazy
Yeah.
thing. I think I don't think, I looked it up. It's Hirohiko Araki is the name of the guy who did
Thank you.
JoJo's, I
Yes.
think. But yeah, no, I'm a big fan of. I'm actually trying to learn Japanese here. I'm taking some of your advice. So I have, this is the second Genki book. I was like, okay, how am
It's
I going
very
to do
hard.
this so that I actually am getting better though? Because you can read those books, you can do every one of the exercises there, but you're not really. You're going to be able to
Yeah.
say some things and write some things in
Yeah.
Japanese, but you're not. I've been. That's like a running gag on this podcast that I'm still sucking at Japanese. So I mean, I've been trying to navigate my way around it. So I'm going to apply some of the things you just said to that. But how did manga get in there? I don't know. Like honestly, if you have any time constraints or anything, tell me because
No, I'm good.
I'll stop. But that's pretty much it. Like this is a long form thing. We could ramble as long as you feel like you want to ramble. Because I think this is really excellent. I think a lot of people could including myself could benefit from this. But yeah, how did I did notice in your TikToks and your Instagrams the manga influence. You had mentioned that this is a kind of a synthesis of sci-fi and coding and hacking and action as well as manga and anime into a lot of your writing. So you're taking these styles and kind of synthesizing them. Would that be accurate to say?
Yeah. Yes. So we are very fortunate to be in a day and age where we're not limited by tropes in independent publishing. You know, my book, The Last Hacker, like I really don't believe any publisher would ever pick it up because it doesn't fit the mold of what bookstores are looking for. And there's a lot of books that are like that. And so with independent publishing, you can really do some great things. So for me, I want to do the things that are interesting to me. And when I go in those, so I'm in some Facebook groups where all these top independent authors, like the ones who are making like 100,000 a month, $200,000 a month, like, they have their list of rules that you need to abide by in order to make those types of numbers, and I'm just really not interested in that. Like, I'm really interested in building my audience and attaching them to me and my style, not necessarily attaching them to a genre or a trope like a lot of those authors are trying to do. Which is the strategy is you release large series with very particular tropes and categories and things that people are very familiar with. And what they do is they read through yours and then they go to the next author, and they may not even remember your name, but it's kind of like the idea of how many people go to Benihana's to get that amazing cooked in front of you meal where they're throwing the flames up versus how many people go to McDonald's? Well, yeah, millions of people go to McDonald's every single day. So you got to feed them. And they'll even say that publicly. It's like, so we're basically, we're the McDonald's. We're feeding the people what they want. And it's paying off well for them. But for me, it's like, I have the chance to create whatever I want. So that's where this whole manga anime thing comes in. And I read lots of manga and anime. You can't see it all, but I've got series on the walls above in my bookshelves and stuff. And my kids are way into manga. And I don't get moved a whole lot by literature. It's just my personality, like where I'm just like, oh my gosh, that was impactful. But for some reason, when I watch particular anime or manga, I'm like, wow, that's really great. Like they just know how to catch you and like really make you laugh and feel things, and they do it so incredibly well. And I really want to do that to people. And so I know for my stories. And so, I analyze those things and I read those things. And when I read the Japanese literature, it's so succinct and just straightforward, but character focused. Like I recently read the Omnis series Vampire Hunter D,
Hmm.
and have you read that before?
It's I actually haven't read it, but it's legendary because of there was an '80s
Yeah.
movie, there was another
Yeah.
one that came out in the
So,
'90s, and I saw all that
yeah.
stuff. Vampire
Okay, yeah.
Hunter
So
D.
it was a
Yeah.
it was a book. It was a novel before it was an anime, and I read it recently, and it's absolutely phenomenal because you're connected to this character, this vampire hunter D, and you're just following his journey. Like there is no major plot. Like it's just three different stories, three different journeys of encounters that he has. That's the three stories, the three books that are put into this one novel, but you're so committed to it. And I said to myself, it's like, I want to do that. I want to write a story where people come back for a character and they come back for me, and like then I can write whatever I want, right? I can write a horror story. I can write a sci-fi, like whatever I write, those same people will come back to me because they want that thing that I gave them before. And that's the complete opposite of what people are teaching in those independent publishing groups. Like they want you to follow the tropes so you can make your money, and get 50 books on Kindle Unlimited and you will make $100,000 a month, which is very true. And but anyway, so long story short, so the anime and manga, I really love the fact that they focus on characters, and I really love the fact that everything is serialized. In fact, this book I was telling you about earlier, where me and my daughter wrote a book to reward ourselves at Disney World. I'm prototyping the Japanese light novel. I'm doing it American style, where I write 50,000 word novels, 5, 6, 7, 8 volumes of that, and I just sell them one after the other. That allows me to get a book done in a month, and allows people to keep reading, and it allows the story to keep going because everybody is like, okay, create your 3-part series, and it's like 120,000 words, takes forever to make, and you go on to the next one. Like The Last Hacker is fun, but it's a 3-part series. Each book's 110,000 words. I'm limited by what I can do. I gotta end shop at a certain point. I gotta cut things off. So I'm prototyping because we're in this free world right now. I'm prototyping, serializing just like they do in Japan, but for myself, where I can write 10, 15, 20 novels. Whenever I feel like I'm done and the people are satisfied, I can be done, but without having to group things into big fat novels. And so that's why I'm really interested in manga and anime, because when you watch fans of anime and manga, they're like, okay, when's the next novel? When's the next novel? Like Dragon Ball Super right now, they're like number 17 or 18 is in pre-order because it's not out yet in America. And it's got, all these pre-orders, and everyone's like, when's it coming out? I was like, well, I really want to do that for my stuff. Like, it's not a typical thing we do in America is serializing things like that. On Webtoons we are, but can I do that with books? And because I'm building my own audience, I know that I can. Would I ever be able to sell a serialized novel through Barnes and Noble? No one's ever going to buy that. That's not in their thing. And on Amazon, it might do okay with Kindle Unlimited or something. But anyway, that's why I'm really interested in manga and anime, because I don't have the numbers in front of me, but in the last 3 years alone, manga and anime sales have gone through the roof, like a significant percentage increase. You'll see that at stores, Barnes and Noble specifically too. Sci-fi fantasy is being removed from the front of walkways and put where comics used to be, and manga is being put in the front, and those shelves are increasing by like 40% capacity. And you go into Hot Topic, it's manga and anime everywhere. Like 70% of their junk is manga anime. You go into Spencer's at the mall, and all of these stores, Target, a whole wall full of anime, manga stuff. Like every store, like this, it's increasing. It is that market is here, and because the independent publishing market's so free right now, you can do whatever you want. And so I'm playing around with some of those ideas, and this particular novel I just finished actually it's very fast paced, like Japanese literature, and like my last Hacker series, which a lot of people really like, is very fast paced. Whereas some stories you don't get very far. Like I read recently, Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson, and it was like 300,000 words, and literally in 300,000 words, a guy gets out of slavery, discovers who he is, and that's it. That's like that's what happens in 300,000 words, and it's a great book. It's got the slow burn, but like I don't write like that. And Japanese literature is the complete opposite of that. So
Things
anyway,
get
that's
started.
what I'm prototyping out.
I can understand that because I think I even saw that somewhere, even on your posts, where it's like a lot of fantasy novels. It's like, oh, just get past the first 150 pages, and you're gonna see something happens. Something happens. Trust me. And it's like, well, maybe that's a little too long. Oh, so that's fascinating, actually, to me. That it's not just the manga or anime itself, but also its delivery method. Essentially, like its method of breaking it up into smaller pieces and stuff. Oh,
it works because of the delivery method.
Wow, I didn't even realize. That's amazing. No, it's true. I don't read a lot of manga, but my favorite is Lone Wolf and Cub. I don't know if you know that one or not.
I'm not familiar with that one. No.
It's an older one, samurai story. It's a legendary one if you're into that. It's Kozure Okami in Japanese, and essentially it's that. You've got these things happen to this samurai at the beginning. You might have heard of the movie Shogun Assassin or something like that. Like that's actually just a kind of a cut up English dubbed version of Lone Wolf and Cub.
Okay.
Because that was a series, black and white series they made. Anyway, sorry, it's about the samurai. He's traveling the world with his very young son, as a Ronin, trying to get revenge essentially for the death of his wife, because they had come to assassinate him, and now basically this guy includes all this stuff from Japanese history during that time. But essentially that's it. He just goes from place to place, kind of taking on adventures and whatnot. It's not necessarily about whether he reaches this goal or not.
Right.
And it goes in that way, and it's just in I have the omnibus collection of it. I think it's one of the best comics in general, whether you want to call it a manga or not. Like, put all comics into it, it's one of the best there is. But having it be that it's in these small things, you're like, okay, there's one story, and it's like, okay, well, what's the next story? I want to know what happens to this guy. How far does he get? And there's an overarching path, that eventually we get somewhere with it, but it didn't happen immediately. But also something always happens, and it happens to him, it happens about him or his child, and it's just about values essentially, more than anything else.
And you're connected to the character, right? Because you're like, I want to know what's next with this person. It could go on forever.
Because essentially, like in a lot of Japanese stories, he will not do things the way that everybody else is going to do it, or somebody else might run, he won't run. You could take advantage of killing this guy right now, he's going to try to kill you, and instead he'll help him up, and then they'll fight like that. He's like, well, no, I don't do like that. Or it might be the other way, it might, because he's a Ronin, he's like, okay, we have to take the demon road. So he's saying we're going to have to go wild here and not necessarily follow the rules. And then that's the story there. So now it's really, though, what this character has decided and what he wants to do. So I think I could see what you mean by that. But that's sorry, I kind of went off on a rant there because I just
That's
thought it was
great.
really interesting that their delivery method is what I mean. You seem to be able to focus in on what works for things, and also this is interesting too because you didn't want to do what is essentially, in a way, artistically bankrupt for you. Like you could put out a bunch of these novels that are tropes in a genre and then be the McDonald's, right? But that's not really exciting to you, I think. Is that what I'm hearing? Is that you wouldn't really want to do that
Yeah.
because you're just okay? Yeah, you could make $100,000 a month if I did that, but am I really? You could also lay bricks, or you could also buy real estate or something. Then
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I have the advantage, of not having to worry really quickly about, making a bunch of money from all of this. Because like even from the Kickstarters, everything I made from that, I put back into this business, this thing that I'm doing here. And so I'm more interested. I'm more interested in doing what I want. And sometimes it's easy when you start something new because you see everybody else doing things certain ways. You want to fall in line because that's what's best practice, and those guys are right. They're in what they do. And But I remember I had, in this particular Facebook group, I had posted on there like, guys, this is the kind of approach I want to take. I notice you guys are saying you want to do this and this, tying people to the genre, the tropes, but I want to attach people to me. And like everything I just told you right now, I did that in a Facebook post saying like, what do you guys think? Why wouldn't this work? Why don't you guys ever talk about doing it this way? And literally everyone just ripped me apart saying, no, that's not going to work. Who do you think you are? Someone's literally said, who do you think you are? Stephen King or Neil Gaiman? Because if you're not amazing like them, you don't even have a chance in this fight of being that person that you want to be. Because I had mentioned, well, there's other authors where, it doesn't matter if Stephen King writes horror or sci-fi or like a comic. People, or like, The Dark Tower, which is like a urban fantasy, you know, people come to him to read his words, and they said, well, that's not you. These people are great and amazing. And I was just like, and then when they said that, it triggered in my mind. I was like, I understand now. I'm in the wrong place. I am in the wrong place for what I'm trying to accomplish. I understand they have their ways, and that's fine, the independent publishing in that type of sense. And then on the publishing side too, like even when I'm like working with this New York Times author, they have told me, things that will work for a publisher and things that will not. Like they'll say straight up say, no, they're going to throw your book away if you write that, because that's not what they're selling. And I don't want that either. Like I'd like to write what I would like to write the way I would like to write it. And you can't do that unless you build an audience, unless unless you're in it for like the long haul. It can be very difficult because then you won't sell your book, right? But I'm building an audience, and so that allows me to do those things.
that makes sense. In terms of building the audience, I've noticed that you seem to want to create an experience for the people that are interacting with your work. I noticed that like the story on TikTok where you're going to
Yes.
be face to face with them, even with your app, which I downloaded by the way, and I was listening to John Carter. You narrated John Carter, which is awesome. I was
Yeah.
also, and then you can also go on YouTube and listen to the short stories of Rage, and pretty much anywhere you go I can experience, or I could read the book paperback. I could also listen to it on Audible. I can also look at it digitally. So through all of these different mediums, I guess this is also, it's two questions in one in a way, because I'm asking how are you building that audience, and then also how are you creating that experience for your audience, and maybe a third question is how would you best like people to interact or experience with your work. I mean, I guess so that's three things. Sorry to jam them all together into one, but
Yeah.
answer any one or all if you'd like.
So I like the fact that you say the word experience, because that is actually a word I think about a lot. For me, I think everything should be an experience. Sometimes I read a book, like I read an amazing book. Like I really loved Hyperion by Dan Simmons. And when I finished listening to the audiobook, I was just amazed that he could do what he did in those words, and I wanted so much more. I wanted more Dan Simmons, but he doesn't write very many books, and he's not invested. And I was just like, I really want to create an experience that people can get involved with, that they're, whether it's watching behind the scenes, whether it's books or samples of things that I'm writing or creating, letting them be part of the process. And I'm still figuring that out. To answer the other question, like I'm figuring out which mediums and which platforms. YouTube is a complete failure. Yeah, I've got like 700 subscribers, but I still can't figure out YouTube. Because what I want to do is not working on YouTube. And so, and that takes a lot of time as well too. And so figuring all of that out still is part of the process. I have this app called the Wahlbeck app where you get unlimited sci-fi fantasy stories. And I have this idea, this dream that, we can find independent authors who need help getting their work out, getting it produced in audio format. Because, creating an audiobook can cost you upwards of for reasonable narrators, like $5,000 to $7,000. Of course, professional narrators can go up to $20,000. And depending on the deal, they can take a cut of your royalties as well too. The super famous people will do that sometimes. And so it's very hard. And so I had this idea of getting people's work into audio format at a reasonable cost. But I'm testing these things out. I'm testing out different experiences for me, like making those trailers and TikTok, like these movie trailers, these book type trailers. It's an experience. Like even my Kickstarters, if you watch the videos at the beginning, like they're like exciting, full of energy, and like almost like a movie. And so everything for me is an experience. Like I have to make sure I'm having a lot of fun doing it. And if I feel like if I have fun with this process, then other people would have fun with it too. So everything I do is kind of selfish in a sense too, because it has to be really fun for me. And I like experiences. Like I went and saw Jurassic Park the other day, and I drove an hour so I could go watch it in an IMAX, because I wanted the best sound. I want to be able to like feel it. And so I try to be very mindful of things like that. So yes, experience. I'm still figuring things out. I don't have all the answers. I know that TikTok is really starting to work for me. I'm going to be putting all of my focus on that, in those stories that I'm posting there, because also I get emails added up all the time too. So if you click my link in my bios, there's a little email form. Even that form alone, is getting between 10 and 50 new people every single week. I've got an email list of about 5,000 people. If you can get, here's a fun fact, being in the marketing world, if you can get someone on your email list, at least 10% of those people, when you sell a product, will purchase that product. So I can always use those numbers for anything I'm going to launch, like projections. Should I do this? Should I not do this? So I really focused on growing that list. I'm not doing any paid ads for that right now. I have in the past, but all of it's coming organically for free from TikTok and Instagram. And so that is how I'm building my list. So right now I've got about 20,000 followers on TikTok. I don't even know on Instagram. It goes up and down, 13,000, 14,000. And then about 5,000 people on my email list right now. And, it's growing. Oh, and not to mention, I think there's been about 10 or 15,000 people who have read my book, The Last Hacker, who may or may not follow me in any particular place. So
that's it. So, okay, well, yeah. So put out something that's good, put out as many things as you can, try a bunch of different platforms and see what platforms are working essentially for you.
Yeah.
Saying TikTok's working, these other guys, maybe not so much. But you do have something on all of those things, and you can kind of project. And then also the email list, of course. So that's interesting. Okay. No, well, very, very cool. And I also really do like that, that you do want to make the thing that you want to make, and that you're finding a way to do it regardless of the discouragement that can happen. People say, hey, well, like you mentioned that earlier, well, who are you, Stephen King? Who are you, Neil Gaiman? Or like maybe not, but you are yourself. And I you can go online and find anything. You can find somebody who's got millions of views, like, or look at a
Yeah.
construction. There's like construction companies where it's like, look, we're making floors, and there's 5 million 15-second clips of them making a floor. They have 2 million followers.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
so who are you, Stephen King? Like, who are you? But
Right.
so it's like, well, why were they able to do that? And maybe you're not going to be able to for some reason. Maybe that's just doubts. People have doubts and fears, and they're possibly projecting that on you in a way. And I don't know. Life is for the living, and if you're going to put yourself
Yeah.
through all this work, I mean, why not live? Why not live life,
Yeah.
right? So I think that
You know,
that
that's the
makes
other
a lot of sense
thing
to me.
related to what you're saying there is I everyone told me, every author on the planet told me, first off, probably don't publish your first book. Secondly, your first book's going to fail. Third, don't expect to make any money at all on your first book because you need between 3 and 10 books, to really have success. And I rejected all those ideas out of the gate. I literally, and if you don't have confidence, like those things are hard. And I have experience with my business, but like everyone told me, your first book, don't expect anything, don't make it a big deal, don't do anything. And I rejected all that. I was like, you know what? I want to sell my first book. I'm going to publish it and I'm going to sell it. And I'm going to do that no matter what. And even right now, I have, okay, so I only have one book published, and that book, let's see, let me just do some math here. That book has made like almost $40,000. One book, my first book. And it wasn't because I was extra smart or extra great writing or anything. Like I rejected the narrative, to what you're talking about, people talking about doubt, having doubts and things like that. You can literally do whatever you want. And of course, the next book did a Kickstarter as well too. And anyway, like you reject all that stuff. If like just do whatever you want, and as long as you have confidence is key. But everyone will tell you what not to do. Everyone has their advice to give, and I'm definitely of the opposite opinion. Like do whatever you want, and if you do it with passion, like it will work out for you, especially with today's openness of everything.
That makes a lot of sense. And also, it does kind of make me think that if you were, okay, don't think that it's going to work, don't think that it's going to be well, then what are you aiming for here? Like, how is that a goal? Right? Like, it's difficult. Like,
Yeah,
no, I'm writing this book because I want to sell this
yeah,
book. I want people to read it. But no, don't worry. They're not going to, and don't feel, well, then what about
yeah,
the next one? What am I doing differently? Yeah, that does seem
yeah.
like it would be a
And you always get
difficult
better. You
plan.
always get better. If it doesn't work out as well as you want, that's okay. You can keep getting better. Like, but to like throw it all out the window before you even published, and I had another call with another New York Times bestselling author who gave me that advice at one point. Like, honestly, don't put your first 3 to 5 books out there. It'll ruin your reputation. It'll ruin your name for when you actually get good. And like they hadn't read my stuff, but that was the advice they were giving. And I was like, well, I reject that too. I just reject that. I don't agree with that at all.
That makes sense.
Whatever.
Yeah, no, well, why not? But at the same time, too, I think a lot of people who are in particularly artistic fields, I think maybe that's where some of your strength comes from in terms of, I know you mentioned a few times, like, hey, look, I've been an entrepreneur, I've run companies, I have some confidence that I'm going to be able to make this work. A lot of people who start in writing, they're doing this because
Right.
it's like they don't actually have that confidence. They do have a lot of doubts. It weighs on them. They're especially on those days where you write something, you kind of know it wasn't that good, and you know you're going to be
Yeah.
going back and rewriting it. I've had that once where I wrote a first draft of a book in about 30 days, and I just was like, okay, I think I'm going to rewrite chapter 1, 2, and 3 are good, and then everything up to chapter 20. I think I'm going to change, and most of these characters aren't going to stay because I don't really like them. And that happens. And you're
Yeah.
thinking like that can hit you a little bit, make you feel doubts. It can make you feel fears, and you can feel like not as confident as maybe you should feel. Are there any ways that you handle doubts and fears and stuff like that? What's your take on those things?
Yeah. Well, I think if you can change your mindset that failure is critical to success, then everything changes for you. Like it's why I told you, like when I'm in these weekly clubs and this author just tears me to shreds, like I'm like loving every minute of it because like you have to experience failure like in order to really have success. So like you should like totally embrace that stuff, like embrace it all, and just let it be what it is. Let it be that failure. And for me, like there's times when I cringe on some of those chapters, and I come back and I was like, you know what? And I have like a beta reader read something, and they don't say anything. They're like, oh, this was amazing. And it's just like, I try to, some people are more perfectionists than me. I'm not a perfectionist. I'm of the mindset of, get it something 70% there, and like you're really at a good spot, because it's really easy to perfect things over and over and over again. And so like just out of the gate, if you're like getting into writing, like just know you're going to fail, and you are going to suck at points. And like, I do too. Like I look at my first book, The Last Hacker, and compared to what I'm writing now, like I'm like cringe. Like that's what my kids say. They say cringe. That's a thing now.
Yeah, yeah, of course.
I'm so cringe. But it's bad. Like but people, what's crazy is someone messaged me the other day saying this is the most amazing book I've ever read, and I read multiple books a month. And I'm like, what? Like some person read my first book, which I think is terrible now, and said it's the most amazing book they have ever read, and they read books every single month. So you know, your cringe may be somebody else's binge. Can I trademark that?
Cringe is someone else's
But like,
binge.
but yeah, so like, just accept those failures, but so long as you're improving, right? Like we talked about learning, so
Mm.
long as you're improving, then that justifies the failures. If you're not improving, then that doesn't justify your failures. Like you have to keep getting better. So like when I do get bad reviews and things like that, I like the ones that are reasonable, like I actually take to heart and I improve those things. And sometimes you got to step outside of yourself and the emotion, and and sometimes people don't know what they're talking about. Like one person messaged me and sent me this terrible message about how this book is so ridiculous, so awful, and like all of these different things. And I said to I was like, well, I'm gonna just talk to this guy. So it was on Facebook Messenger. Like it was like they took the time to rip into me. I'll just take the time to talk about him. And I was like, well, I really appreciate your feedback. I'll look into these things, and I see what you're saying. And then he completely changed. He's like, actually, I'm sorry, I'm going through a really tough time right now. Like, actually, I've read this book twice.
Oh,
And I'm like, okay, this person just said they hated my book. Well, they've read it twice.
crazy.
And then they talk about how they're going through some struggles and things, and so, take all that stuff with a grain of salt. Like, just take what you want out of reviews and feedback, improve, and embrace your failures and choose to improve on them. And, sometimes, and I don't, I make sure not to open my phone and look at reviews before bedtime or the first time I wake up. Like I literally like be like, okay, let's just take a gander on Goodreads or whatever and see what's going on. I got to mentally prepare for some of that stuff too sometimes. But um, yeah, I enjoy failing because I know that it
Mm.
means I can get better.
You
It's
know,
weird. Like I know it's a weird outlook. So
I don't think that that's that weird. I mean, it's a thing that a lot of successful people tend to say is, at least you're failing forward in a sense. That's a classic thing as well. Is like if you're learning from those mistakes. I mean, I don't know anybody who's ever done, let's say, a martial arts class or weightlifting or anything like that where they weren't as good at the beginning as they were going forward, and it was through
yeah,
being told they weren't doing it correctly that it helped. It's a little bit different in art sometimes because, like you say, there can be people that are telling you you're not doing it correctly when really maybe you're on the right track. So it can get muddied that way, I guess. But I think I understand what you're saying. And I was gonna say too, I noticed that you don't just take advice from just random people either. It sounds like you have like what does your team, if you want me to put it that way, look like? There was a beta
yeah.
reader you'd mentioned, editor, I think, and also there's some of these coaches now who are bigger authors that are helping you. What do you think how does that work? How does your team put together so that you can be confident in the final product?
Yeah, that's a good question. Those things are happening now. They didn't happen in my first book, but I will say, literally, the best thing I've ever done, and I still do, is you just look at the top authors that are like selling in the world, like the absolute best of the best. Like for me, that's like Stephen King, or some other people in sci-fi fantasy. Like read famous people, Orson Scott Card, other people, whatever genre you have, because you can quickly see what they're doing. Right. And so for me, that's had the biggest influence, is like, how do I improve? Now, sometimes you can't see your own, even though you know something, you actually can't see your problems unless somebody says, okay, looks at your work, and actually critiques it. So having someone to critique your work is really great. But the thing is about critiques is, art is taste, especially writing. Everyone has their own taste. And so you got to be careful. You got to know, you have to know who you, okay, I'm going to say this. You have to know who you are before you decide to let people critique you. Because if you don't know who you are, you're going to feel down and everyone's going to rip you up, and you may not get to where you want to be. And so, I'd be very careful about critiques, because I've tried multiple writing groups, and when people gave me feedback and I don't agree and it was not useful, whereas this group I'm in now, I have someone who's way better than me, who's a top selling person. Every Barnes and Noble you go to, his books are there, and he's ripping me to shreds. And I'm learning every week. Like, I'm taking notes and all kinds of amazing things. Like, I learn every single week that I wasn't getting from the other critiques. People, just be like, well, you should do this and this. I'm like, no, I don't like books that do this and this. Like, I don't like, and so it's important to make sure you have the right people in your wheelhouse to support you. So yeah, the beta reading is fine, but even then, I'll take their feedback, and if I find problems, I'll fix them. But at the end of the day, like, I'm still going to do what I feel right about, and that's what you should do too, as a writer too. So you've got to be careful with those things.
That's really true.
So just look. That's advice. Look to the books. Look to the books.
Look to the books. Look at, like, so it's sort of, in a sense, modeling after the people who have already been very successful in this, and that who everybody loves,
Yeah.
essentially, and saying, okay, look, these guys did it. I could do it. What one man can do, another can
Yeah.
do, I guess.
Yeah. Look at their styles too. Like Orson Scott Card. I'm reading his new book, Wakers, and you'll notice if you read that book, he has no detail. It's a super fast paced book, and you're following this character. You're so interested in the character and what he's doing. But like other authors, like Brandon Sanderson, would be like, okay, there's a car and it's rusted and the world is bleak and dreary. And like, he'd explain everything. Orson Scott Card explains nothing. And Orson Scott Card has a class on writing, which I've taken. You can order it from his website. It's amazing, phenomenal. And, he has some very strong opinions about writing. But it works really well. So you can find authors who have different styles. Like Stephen King is all about that internal dialogue and character, like super intense character focus, and their backstories and like what makes them tick. Whereas Orson Scott Card gives you just a little less details, and you just follow a character through his world. And those are two completely different writing styles. And if you add like someone like Brandon Sanderson, who does exposition on everything from the cufflinks and the buttons on your clothes and all of these things, like, you can find who you want to be like, who is successful, because people are reading their stuff, and find people in that world who appreciate that, and bring those people into your circle. So this particular New York Times author I'm working with, his writing style is fantastic. It's the exact style that I want. And I would, if Brandon Sanderson had a writing group, I wouldn't join it, because a writer can only teach what they know and who they are. And I don't want to write how he writes, because I literally punched my dashboard in the car when he was in a chapter explaining this town and all these people's clothes. And I literally punched the dashboard and screamed because the chapter wasn't ending, and I felt like dying. And like, some people like that stuff. It's not for me. Don't bring those people into your group if that's not how you write, because they're going to tell you to do it a different way than you want to do it. So you do need to also find the right taste, the people who are in that same taste as you.
That makes a lot of sense too. So it's qualified advice, and that is actually working
Yes.
towards what you want. It's not, and not even qualified, because, like you said, this other guy's a great writer. He's amazing, but I'm with you on that. Actually, I don't like it when there's a million tons of detail. I think Stephen King mentioned that as well, right? Where he's like, I'm not going to tell you. I'll say that her clothes
Yep.
were shabby, and you can imagine what
Yep.
shabby is to you, and we'll move on.
Yep.
And I'm of that mind as well. And I've actually listened to a lot of Orson Scott Card stuff before bed. So I'm a fan of that too. So I think I know what you're saying there. But if that's not you, and you are the detail, let's do details and stuff, then maybe get that advice from that person. Oh,
Yep.
that's really cool. It reminds me of a time too where I did take a writing course about revising, and I felt like that was a huge mistake. There was 12 people in the course. There were 11 stories about a sad girl that doesn't go anywhere, and then my story about a yakuza and an architect and two different sides of the world who were switching places mentally constantly, and they were like, "Yeah, I guess this is okay. I don't know, maybe." I was like, "Hey guys, write a story where something happens. I get it. She's sad. What else?" So I
Yeah.
think it's it. It's not that they were doing the wrong thing or that I was doing the wrong thing, but I was definitely in the wrong pond there. So that's amazing. I know like we're starting to run a little long probably for for me, no, but I don't want to keep you too
Yeah,
much
I gotta
longer.
go wrap up dinner and stuff here soon.
Yeah, okay, we'll wrap it up. I actually have a few questions that I generally ask most
Sure.
people. It's just they're kind of rapid fire, so this is how I do it. So the first thing is art is essentially like in Japanese they call it bijutsu, which is jujitsu is like a fighting style, or jutsu means technique essentially, and bi is beauty, so it's the technique of beauty. So it's part of the reason why I even have this podcast. One of the spines of it is beauty. It's beauty, battle, and business essentially. So what when you hear the word beauty, what does that mean to you?
It just means whatever you want it to mean, really. Like so long as you are good with it, so long as it means something to you. If you can, because if you can drive it that way, then it doesn't, nothing else really matters, you know. So, and not everyone's gonna like it either. So it has to mean something to you. Otherwise, it may not mean anything at all. So,
That makes sense. So, and the another question I usually ask is, what does it mean to be an adult or be mature? I might change that a little bit for you because you have so many kids. What does it mean to be a father? Could be another way to put that. Is that involved in maturity or being adult, that kind of thing? So, what to you does
yeah.
it mean to be a father? Being that you have such a large family, I'm very interested of what your take is on that.
Yeah, well, it definitely changes your perspective on everything you do, and every single aspect of what you do and who you are. And it absolutely is different than being single. It's different than having a girlfriend or whatever, a boyfriend. It's different than having a dog. It's different uh, than a million other life circumstances that you could ever have. And it adds a depthness and richness to everything that you do that you wouldn't have otherwise. And like from your art to writing, whatever, because you, in a sense, you're creating life, you're sustaining life, you are enriching people, training people, teaching people, and so it means all of those things, everything in between, and it's also something that you really, can't know unless you experience it. And in terms of writing, you'll see that a lot too with authors, especially ones like Stephen King who have families and things like that. Like you can you get a lot of sense of that richness that you don't get when you're younger in life. Things are different motivations. So
Wow. I appreciate that, and honestly, I appreciate your time, man. Thank you so much. You really you opened my eyes on a few things here, and I hope that some other people are inspired and by the things you've said. So thank you so much for being here. Thank you for taking the time to talk to me. I really appreciate it, especially since you have so much going on in your life. No, thank you for sharing. Really, honestly.
yeah, I appreciate it. I could talk about writing all day, and especially for me, because I love to teach, but I know what it's like to have doubts and all those things. And so if there's any way like I can say anything that would encourage someone to do something that they're been hesitant to do, then I think it's awesome, and I'll do it anytime.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I'll let you go, even though I don't want to, but because I'm really enjoyed this conversation. But thank you so much, man. And honestly, have the best rest of your day. And good luck. Good luck with the book. I will put all of the links that you would like, of course, down into the show notes so that people can take a look because you're kind of everywhere. But I'll leave whatever TikTok, Instagram, the Kickstarters, all of that stuff. I suggest check it out. Download the app if you want to hear some great stories. Check Mark out. He's awesome, as you can tell. I don't even think I need to say that because of this conversation.
Hmm.
So thanks again, man. I'm gonna let you go and Thank you and welcome to the Ragged World. I usually say that at the beginning, but I'm saying it at the end.
All right. Thanks so
Thank
much.
you. Ciao,
See
ciao.
you.